Just over a month ago on June 8th, Donald Trump was indicted by the special counsel Jack Smith on 37 felony counts over illegally retaining classified government documents at Mar-a-Lago. In that investigation, lawyers for the ex-president had been told just days before that Trump was a target. Today, we learned that Trump received another target letter, this one for the January 6th investigation. So we are now officially on indictment watch. Congressman Dan Goldman, Democrat of New York, is a former assistant United States attorney for the Southern District of New York. He was the lead counsel in the first impeachment of the ex-president. He joins me now. Congressman, good to see you. Thank you for being with us this evening.
You too, Ellie.
Let's start with your reaction to the news of Donald Trump being informed that he's a target in the January 6th investigation. Not just are you a member of Congress, but you were a former prosecutor. You were intimately involved with the impeachment of Donald Trump. So I'm sure no surprise to you, but it has now happened. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think what we've seen over the last several months is the special counsel's investigation has been really ratcheting up. They had to go to court a lot to get testimony, and they were able to apparently successfully do it. And so I think this is the notice that many of us have been waiting for, that they are prepared to move forward with an indictment of Donald Trump to hold him accountable for his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. And I think there are a lot of folks who have been watching and saw what happened not only on January 6th, but in the lead up to January 6th and all of the increasingly lawless efforts outlined so expertly by the January 6th committee designed to subvert democracy and overturn a lawful and proper election. And now we're going to see the fruits of both of those investigations, both the January 6th, which I think provided an important roadmap for the special counsel. But the special counsel has a lot more evidentiary tools available to him than Congress does. So I expect we will see a lot of additional evidence.
Tell me, as a former prosecutor and as a member of Congress and as counsel to the impeachment, how that differs, because those of us who were paying attention heard most of the evidence. Right? It wasn't under oath in some cases to, the way it would be if you were reporting it to the FBI, and they couldn't compel everybody who they wanted to testify. But what's the difference fundamentally? What am I likely to hear out of this indictment that I didn't already know from the January 6th committee?
Well, I think the biggest thing that will be different is there will be a lot more witness testimony. There were a number of witnesses who refused to cooperate with the January 6th committee. Some ultimately, like Steve Bannon, were held in contempt of Congress. But the grand jury process allows for the special counsel to get access to that information. The other important information is that we know of, and it relates also to the classified documents case, is that if they are able to pierce the attorney-client privilege, and especially with John Eastman and his role as a quote-unquote lawyer advising Donald Trump, or Rudy Giuliani for that matter, that would be pursuant to the crime fraud exception, and that might be available to the special counsel, and it would not be available to Congress. So those are just a couple of examples that you will see more evidence in this indictment and in this prosecution.
Let's talk about the politics of this. You heard Joyce Vance saying that what may happen to keep this thing tight and not subject to Donald Trump and his lawyers carrying on about the fact that he's very busy running for president, so he can't be prosecuted. You may see what Joyce suggested might be a less satisfying set of charges than what we expect from a sprawling investigation, something that is tight, that prosecutors can make the case about and do so in a short amount of time. What's your thought on that?
Well, I'm particularly interested to see who else is charged and whether they are charged in the same indictment as Donald Trump or a separate indictment. Because in an effort to move forward, you wouldn't necessarily want to have many defendants whose defense lawyer schedules and various other issues that might arise from a multi-defendant case slow it down. But I would be very surprised if the special counsel did not include all of the evidence that he believes to be sufficient to prove a charge beyond a reasonable doubt. And the issue, of course, is not only what Donald Trump's defense lawyers do, but will also be very interesting to see what his taxpayer-funded defense lawyers, also known as House Republicans, do in the coming days and weeks in response to yet another indictment of Donald Trump.
Let me ask you about Matt Gaetz, who says he's planning to introduce a bill to defund the special counsel's investigation. What do you understand to be the legitimacy of that sort of an effort in Congress, and what do you make of it?
There's no legitimacy. It's a ploy. It's a charade. The special counsel, of course, has been appointed pursuant to regulations and is properly funded by the Department of Justice. This is just a continuation of House Republicans' efforts to undermine the institutions that we rely on to adhere to the rule of law. And they don't like that the FBI is investigating Donald Trump and others, perhaps some of their current or former colleagues. And so they, rather than actually reckon with the fact that Donald Trump appears to be a serial criminal, have decided that they're going to go after those trying to hold him accountable. And it is very dangerous to our democracy, to our rule of law, that they continue to try to defund the police in the form of federal law enforcement, in this case, solely for political purposes. And when we hear about political efforts to undermine the rule of law, as from my Republican colleagues, I think they ought to look in the mirror instead of across Pennsylvania Avenue.
Congressman, good to see you as always. Thanks for joining us. Congressman Dan Goldman.